the shock wreaked by the pandemic and extended lockdowns on the global and Indian economy might wear off over time. But some things will have changed forever. For a start, the way we work and the way we do business. To discuss business in the New World Order and how it's changing, we bring you Marcos Prado Troyjo, President, New Development Bank, BRICS Bank. He'll be in conversation with Mohammad Ujeli, Editor, ET Government.
Hello and welcome to ETGlobal Townhall, a special fireside chat with President of New Development Bank, Mr. Marcos Troyjo. Mr. Marcos is economist and political scientist who, before replacing Mr. K.V. Kamath at NDB, served as the Deputy Economy Minister and a Special Secretary for Foreign Trade and International Affairs with Government of Brazil. Mr. Marcos had authored books on development, technology, and global affairs. One of many favorite happens to be Technology and Diplomacy, Challenges for International Scientific and Technological Cooperation. Welcome to Global Town Hall, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join such an important event.
I'll begin with the first question. First of all, congratulations on your new role as a President of New Development Bank. I would like to understand from you, what would be your immediate focus, sir?
Well, some 10 years ago, when I founded a Center for the Study of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa at Columbia University in New York, the so-called BRIC Lag, along with my colleague, Professor Christian Desiglis, BRICS was starting to take shape as an alliance in order to cope with some of the most challenging issues of international economic development, such as infrastructure financing and development of new technologies, sustainable development. And throughout this period, what has been the most successful initiative of the group is the setup of the New Development Bank, which, as you correctly said, for the first cycle of 5 years, had as president a very prominent Indian banker, Mr. K.V. Kamath, who left us a great legacy. And now for this new cycle of 5 years, we want to build upon those accomplishments and add new things. For example, we're talking about the expansion of membership so that the institution lives up to its own very name. So it's going to be more than a BRICS bank. It's going to be a new development bank, more and more encompassing other emerging markets. We want to make sure that we use 21st century technology to tackle the infrastructure challenges of the 20th century. So we want to go to water sanitation, to water management, railroads, ports, making sure that we have the best possible technology to tackle with those. We're also talking about expansion in terms of the complexity of the financing products that we have. So project finance, making sure that we also look into equity, become more and more of a complex and useful institution, a 21st century multilateral development bank. And of course, paying attention to the most important trends that are happening out there. For example, today in the world, there's a very huge level of international savings, and because there's uncertainty, because people are living more. And this is quite a paradox because, on the other hand, you have a sort of absence of projects that are bankable and that are profitable. So bridging these two elements of the paradox is, of course, one of our priorities. We also want to make sure that we build a talent-intensive institution, not only in terms of the best possible human resources that we have at our bank, but also because I think, as the very founder of the World Economic Forum has put, more and more the global economy is driven by talent, not only capital, to the extent that many people say that we're living in talentism now, and not only capitalism. So we want to make sure that the infrastructure projects and the sustainable development initiatives that we support also bear in mind that the competitiveness and the prosperity of our members have to do with the challenges of the fourth industrial revolution, the so-called economy 4.0. And obviously, we also want to help countries cope with this very daunting task living with a COVID-19 world and even the post-COVID-19
Right.
scenario that I hope we can play a very constructive role in.
Absolutely. So, sir, what is your assessment of current pandemic, and what kind of impact do you see putting on the global economy, especially around the supply chain and other elements?
You see, in other international crises, the focus of the problem initiated in the economic sphere itself. On most financial crises that we have lived throughout the 20th century, and even the 2008 and 2011 twin crisis originated because of financial reasons. This is not the case. I mean, the pandemic is something that originated in the health sphere, and that has, of course, very negative effects in the economic world. So there are two challenges there. One, we want to make sure that from a health perspective, we put together all the necessary resources so that the effects can be mitigated. But on the other hand, we also have to look into the economic recovery that is so important. This is not a great recession or a great depression. This is perhaps a great intermission. It's like the world had to push the pause button as a result of the pandemic. And the New Development Bank, for example, is contributing its share of support to economies to recover. We've put together a $10 billion assistance package. The first level of help has been directed to health measures, to alleviating the situation, the social situation in our member countries. But very soon there is going to be a new notch of resources that will be made available for the purpose of restarting the economy at a very robust level.
Right.
So once again, it's a big challenge. In a certain way, it sort of speeds up some of the trends that we were experiencing earlier on. Like the one you said, for example, there is some reconfiguration of global value chains. Mm-hmm. This is not only because of the pandemic, but also because of other more, say, fundamental trends happening in the world today. China, for example, is becoming a high value-added, tech-intensive economy, so that it's only natural that its more labor-intensive activities are also directed to other countries, for example, in its geoeconomic vicinity. And that's why you have so many manufacturing capital being established in countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, and other countries. So yes, there is an effect on global supply chains, global value chains, but this trend has been more accelerated than the pandemic, than any other thing.
Right, absolutely. Since you mentioned about the China part, so I would like to ask you, what is your sense of global supply chain in light of some of the uncertainty that we are seeing because of US-China relationship? It's a kind of zigzag relationship. Now you have a pandemic, and even in the geopolitical context, a lot of things are happening slightly differently.
Yeah, well, you see, the global economy, unlike other moments in history, is very interdependent. When you talk about China and the United States, I mean, for a number of years, China has been the top destination for American foreign direct investment. The United States has been the most important destination for Chinese foreign direct investment. The other day, I did some research on the trade levels between the United States and the Soviet Union. And apparently in the year that their trade was the biggest, it was about $2 billion a year. Well, recently, China and the US were trading $2 billion a day. So the interdependence is there, and I understand that this interdependence has benefited both countries. So I understand that many of the adjustments that are being made now have also to do with the very fact that China's economy is becoming more of a value-added economy. So more technology, more capital relative to labor. And this, naturally, when it comes to, for example, those more labor-intensive factors, ends up making some dislocation. So as we've seen in Japan in the 1970s and 80s, as Japan rose, an important portion of its manufacturing activities were moved to other regions in Asia. We are seeing the same today. There's also a very important element in reconfiguring this global supply chains, which is international trade agreements. I was, for example, in in my role as the Deputy Minister of the Economy in Brazil, one of the lead negotiators of the Mercosur European Union agreement. So an agreement that allows for more trade interaction also allows for more cross-border investment. So this is another way in which I understand global supply chains will be reshaped in the years to come. So there will be the result of geoeconomics. It will be the result of economies maturing and evolving, but they will also be the result of international trade agreements, especially those that involve standards, environmental standards, labor standards, government procurement. These are, of course, the most important shapers of global trade in the 21st century.
Absolutely. What is your sense of global institution, especially the financial institution like IMF, World Bank, NDB, for example, their role in times of pandemic? I mean, we see a lot of, kind of a stimulus coming from the government organization, but we haven't seen a huge amount of support coming for IMF or World Bank, or for example, NDB to a particular government or to a particular state. Although I think last week you announced $1 billion loan to the government of Brazil, but we haven't seen too much things happening on that front.
Well, you see, in reality, there's also an interesting paradox, which is if you compare the kind of response that we have seen in this crisis to other crises, you would have some not very robust domestic response, but many nations came together in providing a collective, say, reaction to, for example, the 2008 crisis. What we have today is a very robust response on the domestic front, whereas there's less of a multilateral response to the pandemic. This is, of course, caused on the one hand by the fact that today, more than ever, you have a truly functional financial systems that can cater to different needs of both governments and the private sector. But it is also true that there has been less coordination among nations. So the level of international cooperation to respond to some of these challenges decreased. But I think more than ever, multilateral institutions are important. They have a role to play. I keep saying to my colleagues here at the New Development Bank that if our institution did not exist, it would have to be invented, because we can give a focus both on the emergency relief aspects, but also on going forward as nations will need support for their economic recovery. So more than ever, some multilateral development institutions have a key role to play, especially if they're agile, if they're lean, if they can provide answers to the crises that are of a just-in-time nature, which I think is the kind of response that, for example, the New Development Bank is offering to the current challenges.
You wrote a couple of big books on technology, a couple of articles on technology. So I wanted to understand from you, what is your sense of role of technology in international trade, especially AI, machine learning, and blockchain? Can they play a catalyst role in terms of easing the kind of intermediaries that we have in international trade?
It's only natural that technology plays a bigger and bigger role in trade, not only in terms of e-commerce that we have seen expand dramatically in this past 6-7 months. You look at companies that have inroads in that regard. They're doing very well because, of course, they provide a very important alternative for those societies that have to engage in more social distancing, and therefore they allow for economic life to continue and for consumption to continue, given the technological tools. But obviously, in artificial intelligence, blockchain will also have a very big role. Blockchain, of course, can provide trusted ledgers, which are key to international trade, because trust, of course, is one of the most important factors. And AI, in many different aspects, can be employed to evaluate consumer preference, to evaluate opportunities of bringing trade financing to those countries or companies that need that kind of financial support. So I see it in an increasing manner, and this is something that should be very welcome, because it's true also that it will increase the level of interdependence, and I think interdependence is something that has brought many positive results for different countries through global trade.
And what is your sense of global economy recovering? Because we already have some type of, global slowdown before pandemic. Then you have a pandemic now. So what is your sense of how long we are going to get to a normal position?
Well, it depends very much on what you would call the normal. I think there's going to be a lot of rethinking in terms of economic activity itself. There's not going to be a one-size-fit-all answer for everyone. Some of the countries will recover faster from the current situation by enacting more structural reforms. Some countries will recover faster by allowing trade flows to resume normality as soon as possible. Some countries will recover faster as they are able to tackle the more health-related issues that are not necessarily of an economic nature. So there's not one uniform response. But one thing that we can say is that let us take, for example, the Latin America-Asia relationship. It does seem that Asia is recovering faster, and Latin America is a great supplier of food, and therefore exports to Asia have been very strong, because it once again creates that level of connection, of complementarity that is so key for international trade to flourish. But once again, when we have the vaccine, when we have the necessary health instruments to allow for normality, I understand that will create also a kind of momentum for the global economy, and maybe the recovery will be much more agile than we are estimating at present.
Right. We see a lot of friction between some of the members of the BRICS nation. For example, India and China have something going on at the border. There's, some bans on the use of app. There is some, legislation coming up on data center management, on data sovereignty. So how robust is the NDB base? I mean, when your members themselves are not agreeing to a lot of things, so obviously there seems to be some question mark on your performance. So how do you look at?
So these groups exist because they have interests in common. This is true about BRICS, and it's true about other, say, diplomatic architectures in the world, like the G7. When you look at the G7, you also see that the members are very different when considered individually. But in the case of BRICS, they share some interests in common. For example, the importance of sustainable development, the importance of clean energy, the importance of investment in traditional infrastructure, the importance of having the necessary resources available for that to happen. So it's on these issues that the institution that I currently head, the New Development Bank, focuses on, and will continue to do so.
Mr. President, thank you for talking to ETGlobal Town Hall.
Please share your feedback on the session by making use of our comment box. We'll catch you in the next session.